Hi, everybody. Welcome. If it's okay, I'm going to dedicate this class to the Refuah Shlema of Pnina Sarah Basketel Mindel, who needs Refuah Shlema. And as always, this class was begun in honor of Lior Tova Bas Rachmim, her neshama should have an aliyah. And I always wanted to remember her great light that is shining still and always in all of our hearts. Okay, so today we are speaking about chapter 31, Perek Lamed Aleph, which is so exciting. We have started the 30s of the Tanya, and we have been speaking up until now about a few different things. Like we are quoting again from Rabbi Paltiel, this is the troubleshooting aspect of the Tanya, where the Chassid is coming to the Alter Rebbe and he's saying, I've heard everything you've explained up until now, and I understand that you want me to be working in my Avodas Hashem, but there's something stopping me and I just can't figure out what it is. And so the Alter Rebbe is going through all the different reasons why this chassid might not be able to be implementing all the different beautiful things that the Alter Rebbe was talking about in Prakim previously. So we spoke about, starting from Parachav Zayin and on, we're talking about troubles, hardships, negative thoughts, behaviors, sin. So now we got into the conversation from Perek Chav Tes through Perek Lamed Aleph, the concept of Teshuvah. And here the Alter Rebbe is saying, you know what might have happened? You might have experienced a Timtum Alev, something is covering you, blocking you off from experiencing connection with Hashem, from feeling the reality of his experience. And so therefore, if there's some sort of Timtum Alev, we need to figure out a way to see what's blocking, what is stopping you from experiencing godliness or experiencing the passion, the zeal, the joy, the love, the intensity of that experience, which is supposed to be the experience of your neshama. So there the chassid is saying, right, like last class we were speaking about how the chassid says, honestly, like I haven't really sinned. So we're talking about a very high caliber chassid. And so the Alter Rebbe says, if it's true that you haven't sinned, then it could be that it's from a sin that you did in the past and that you have to do teshuvah for again, because now you're a greater person, so you have to return, right? Teshuvah is supposed to be returning. I'm going to return back to my original state, and I'm going to do teshuvah on something that I've already done teshuvah for. And then the chassid says, but I've already done something like that, or that's not even necessary. So the Alter Rebbe says, now is it possible maybe that in the neutral realm of your life, you have not done as much as you should have, because like you just stayed neutral. And so then the Alter Rebbe says, maybe do teshuvah for that. And then the Alter Rebbe says, maybe for the good that you've done, you still haven't done it good enough. So maybe you have to do teshuvah for that, right? And these are very lofty terms, and we were speaking a little bit about how this is a very lofty level, but there still is what to learn from what the Alter Rebbe is bringing over there. And then the Alter Rebbe starts talking at the end of this is the end of Perek Chav Tes, beginning of Perek Lamed Aleph, where he's talking about if you perhaps feel like you're doing pretty well, maybe compare yourself to somebody else and see that with their set of challenges, how much effort they're putting in to their life, are you putting in the same amount of effort? An interesting story along those lines is a story about the Alter Rebbe who, I don't know if he was a chassid, a man came to him and shared that he had done some very grave sin. And when we're saying grave sin, it's like an unspeakable sin. And something so awful, something so terrible, the Alter Rebbe couldn't even really stomach it, and went to the next room and was crying and crying and crying and crying and couldn't come out. And hours later he emerged, and when he was asked about it, the Alter Rebbe shared, usually when someone shares something with me, I can find a correlation between what they're bringing to me and myself. Here it was such a sorry to use this word, but like disgusting sin, that there was no way for me to feel like there's any sort of something here to connect to. And at the same time, I looked at my Tanya in his mind, and he said, there must be something. There must be in some way that this man is greater than me in some way, because like we learned last week, the concept of heavy sval ruach b'lifnei kol adam, that we should look at every single person from a space of humility. So there has to be something. So then when the Alter Rebbe thought about it, he said, I found 8 different ways that this man is greater than me. This is what the Alter Rebbe figured out, right? And the Mizler Rebbe says, only the Alter Rebbe, only my father could have come up with 8 ways that someone like this is greater than him. But that's literally what the Alter Rebbe is talking about in this parak, where he's saying, look at the other person and see, how are they greater than you? How are they excelling than you? And try to be like that. Maybe that's where you're lacking when it comes to the Timtum Alev. What's bothering you is a little bit of ego. There's a little bit of blockage there. You feel a complacency. You feel like you're good. Really, you have to move forward. And looking at somebody else might help you move forward. Okay? Now we're starting with Perek Lamed Aleph fully. And it's important to reiterate this revolutionary idea that the Alter Rebbe brought forth, which was, again, that mashal between darkness and light. What did the Alter Rebbe say? The Alter Rebbe said that darkness, again, this is a very controversial concept, but that darkness doesn't actually exist. He says, what is darkness? Darkness is the absence of light. It just means that there's light that's not there. The light is blocked off somehow. It doesn't have its own energy. It's just the absence of greatness, of lightness, of ar. And in the same way, the Alter Rebbe is trying to bring the nimshal for evil and good. And he says that evil doesn't actually really exist. It's just the absence of goodness. We give energy to evil. And so when he's talking about, let's say, the Yetzer Hara himself doesn't have energy himself. What happens is, if we give sway to the belief that the Yetzer Hara has power over our lives, or we think, we fall under his suggestions or his whispering in our ears, the voices that we always have in our minds, and we give sway to that, then that means that we are giving energy, or we're giving away our power to the Yetzer Hara. But he himself doesn't have power. We give away our power, which we said last time was the concept of teshuvah, taking back what was lost when we did an avera, when we gave the Yetzer Hara, the evil, our own power, our own energy. We want to take that back. We want to turn it back to its source. That's part of what teshuvah is. So why is it important to talk about that now? Because here in the beginning of Perek Lamed Aleph, we are going to be talking about the great joy that comes along with freeing oneself from bondage. What happens is there's this klipa, there's this covering, a shell covering over that person, whatever form that is coming up for that person. It could be a form of anxiety. It could be they have a belief about themselves. It could be literally an avera that they keep on perpetually doing. Whatever that klipa is. And once I am able to tap into something else and break away from that klipa with that teshuvah, the immediate response is joy. The immediate response is clarity. It's light. There's like a high. There's something, it just falls into place. Almost like, you put water into a tissue and then finally the tissue breaks. That's that moment of just like breaking, it falls in. The mashal is not exactly perfect, but the idea is like the klipa was there, it was holding something away from you experiencing the light, and then as soon as it breaks open, it falls through. What falls through? The joy, the light, it just shines. Why is this important? Because the Alter Rebbe brings up the concept of, you have a question?
I'm sorry, I missed, how do we make that tissue just dissolve away? How do we make that breakthrough?
Right. It's with teshuvah as the short answer. What does that actually look like? Let's go into the rest of the parak to like more deeply understand it. That's the way the Alter Rebbe writes the Tanya. It's like an unfolding. So concepts that you'll be hearing about, let's say we spoke about in Perek Tesvav, or today we're also going to be speaking about a concept that we spoke about in Perek Chav Zayin. It's a concept that we've spoken about, but now you're understanding it a little bit more deeply, a little bit more clarity. Now that he's explained a concept, now from here you could understand this. So a lot of Chassidus works with kind of that unfolding intellectually. You'll see in the Rebbe Sichais, the Rebbe will take, suddenly divert and talk about a concept, and then because we did this, now we can understand this. And then suddenly you have clarity from the clarity that seemingly had nothing to do with the initial conversation, the initial question. So let's talk about this for a moment. So the Alter Rebbe says, what is clarity? Clarity is emancipation. Clarity is freedom. When a person can see something and he knows with surety that this is true, that feels like life. That feels like freedom. okay? And the Alter Rebbe is bringing us back to Perek Aleph, Perek Beis, where the Nefesh Elokis sees Hashem, sees godliness, and has absolute clarity of truth, capital T, truth, right? That is perfect freedom. And that's the life that the Nefesh Elokis is living in a constant. That's where the Nefesh Elokis is at all the time. Now, the opposite of that is disparity, is doubt, which equals prison, where it's not clear, where there's like almost like the concept of Amalek. Amalek is the numerical equivalent to doubt, to suffix, which is interesting. Like the whole concept of Amalek. Amalek was the nation who doubted us from the beginning, created doubt in all the other nations' minds. He was the one who Rashi describes, I think, quoting the Gemara, that imagine like a person who, there's a hot tub and then a person just like jumps in and it suddenly cools off. The concept is suddenly there's no more fear. There's nothing to worry about. We don't have to be scared of the Am Yisrael or their God because he attacked us. So now they're not invulnerable. They're very vulnerable, right? So what is that suffix? That suffix is uncertainty. Suddenly I'm doubtful. Suddenly I'm wavering. I'm nervous. I'm going back and forth. That's anxiety. That's worry. That's me not feeling calm and a sense of just inner peace. That's me constantly going back and forth about things. Whose voice is that? That's the voice of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Uncertainty is always the voice of the Nefesh HaBahamis. Now, the nuance that the Alter Rebbe is bringing over here is the juxtaposition between prison and freedom, where when one is experiencing a sense of like uncertainty, disparity, unclear about something, that's like a covering over. That's like a klipa. It's similar to a prison, as opposed to when someone breaks out of that. And we're going to see tshuva is going to be the way to break out of that. When I break out of that, then suddenly there's a clarity. There's the light. I'm able to understand something. So the Alter Rebbe is bringing this juxtaposition to help us understand a little bit the experience of teshuvah, how it brings us to joy. Because when you experience the light, you see the light, you have an understanding, you see, you lack the uncertainty, you have extreme certainty, then suddenly you experience joy, happiness. This is great, right? And the Alter Rebbe talks about the different types of joy. There's the joy of the tzaddik who's always certain. He lives a life of consistency because it's always joyful to be in tune with your nefesh elokis that is always experiencing the joy of seeing truth, of seeing Hashem in front of his eyes. And then there's another joy where you were doubtful, you were afraid, you weren't sure, but then suddenly you overcame that with tshuva and you see the light and there's this like rush of joy, which is a different kind of joy than the consistent joy of the tzaddik. There's the Baal Tshuva's joy of, wow, like that high, that passion, that excitement of, now I understand, that like chap moment. That's what the Baal Tshuva experiences, which we're all in the same experience because we have all been there where we're experiencing uncertainty and experiencing fear and anxiety. And then that moment of clarity, that's something that we can all relate to that feeling of joy. Now, what the Alter Rebbe is bringing here is not revolutionary per se, right? We've said that since the beginning, that the Alter Rebbe says that I'm quoting my forebears, I'm quoting my teachers when I share with you about the fact that you have a neshama. We know it from Bereshis. In Bereshis it says, Vayifach ba'apav nishmas chayim, that within us was blown a soul. There is a source of life within each and every one of you. We don't need anyone to interpret that for us. It's clear. What is different about what the Alter Rebbe is bringing us here is that the Alter Rebbe believes that we can practically live with that idea. It's not just a theory. It's not just a part of myself somewhere deep inside that I totally don't feel connected to. It's not something, let's say, for Kabbalists, right? So in Kabbalah it talks a lot about neshama, but that was almost written for tzaddikim. It was attainable for tzaddikim. Here, the Alter Rebbe is bringing a Tanya. He's bringing a concept of living with your neshama and saying, let's make it really practical. You can live with your neshama. And that's what Perek Lamed Aleph is all about. How do I experience living with my neshama? And the key to do so is through teshuvah, to experience that joy of living with him. So just to share with you like an interesting example. It's not like a very happy story, but it's an interesting story to bring here. There's a story about Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was an incredible tzaddik, a paisek, and a real influence on early American Jewry. He came in the 1920s, and therefore he was witness to the intensity of living as a frum yid in America. So he was privy to the idea that Shomer Shabbos was almost like life and death. People would get a job, Friday they would be fired if they chose to be Shomer Shabbos. It was like either you feed your children and you break Shabbos, or you don't feed your children and you keep Shabbos. It was a tremendously hard era. And it's just interesting to think of like the land of the free. Well, it didn't feel very free for Fruma Yidden. So one time, this man came to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he was unburdening his soul and saying, I feel terrible. I feel like it's not fair because I was one of the few who didn't keep a job, who lost his job weekly, and still my kids are not from. Like, I made the sacrifice. I did the right thing. How come none of my children are from? It's both. And Rav Moshe Feinstein asked him a little bit. I mean, it's a hard story to hear, but he asked him, like, what did Shabbos look like after you got fired? And he said, what do you mean, what did Shabbos look like? I tried to scrounge together food to make a Friday night meal, and it was very depressing and it was very sad. It was hard for me. And so Rav Moshe Feinstein said, if you're making Shabbos, or if you're making your frum life something that you lament, then in a way it makes sense that your children didn't choose that, right? I don't know his exact wording, but the idea that he was trying to bring to this man was if living a frum lifestyle was hard, heavy, intense, painful, and not enjoyable, then why would they opt to becoming frum or to staying frum? So why are we bringing this example here? Because what the Alter Rebbe is trying to bring, this nuance, where he's trying to say, if you can practically live your neshama's lifestyle, really be in tune practically with your neshama, we're going to talk about what that actually looks like. What it should look like, part of it, should be joyful. Because that is what getting in tune with your neshama is. Because getting in tune with your neshama means breaking away from seeing your body perspective, your nefesh bahamas perspective, the klipas perspective, the limited perspective, right? The bondage perspective, prison. Instead, living from a practical neshama place should feel like breaking open from that. It should feel like joy. It should feel like opening. It should feel like the light is coming in. It should be a celebration. That's how it should feel. And so the Alter Rebbe is suddenly bringing this idea of, if I'm living from my neshama's perspective, then I'm not living from my guf's perspective. I'm coming from a space of, should I choose the sadness and the heaviness of living with my guf, with my nefesh bahamis, who doesn't see Hashem's perspective, doesn't see that Hashem is involved in every practicality of my life. There's so much anxiety there. There's so much intensity and blockage there. Or I can choose to live with the joy of my soul, with the joy of breaking through bondage, with the joy of getting out of prison. So it's supposed to be a celebration of my neshama. It's not supposed to be like a tircha and a threat to my existence. It's not supposed to feel like this is heavy and hard. Another beautiful story about this similar concept is a story about Rav Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, who was known as the prosecutor of Bnei Yisrael. And he was always having the most amazing positive perspective on everything that he encountered. And one day he came into shul, and as was the custom of Rebbes, they would daven Berchas HaShachar out loud in Shachar. So not necessarily are they going to actually be the chazan, but they would say Berachas HaShachar. And as he said the brachas out loud, he actually skipped the bracha of Shalei Asani Gai. And after davening, someone came up to him and said, "Wow, Rabbi, you forgot a bracha." And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak shared. He said, "No, I didn't share the. I didn't forget the bracha. When I woke up in the morning, I woke up with the thought of, what if I had woken up as Ivan, someone else? What if I had woken up like that?" And the thought made me so joyous of the fact that I woke up as me, Levi Yitzchak, a Yid, someone with a neshama, someone that has this incredible bond with Hashem and Torah, that I just jumped out of bed and said the bracha of Shalei Asani Gai. So since I already said it today, I couldn't say it again when I came to Shul. Right? So what is that story? What's the symbolism behind the story? The story is it's not it's good that it's good to be a Jew. It's nice to be a Jew. No, it filled him with joy to have this incredible relationship with Eibishter. To him, living with his neshama was a clarity. There was so much clarity. There was so much joy in it, as opposed to going through the motions or feeling like this is a have to, or I must, or I should, right? Any of those words, when it comes to bringing it to our Jewish practice, makes our Jewish practice feel like practice, makes it feel heavy, makes it feel burdensome. Right? It's almost like the guf perspective. Technically, this concept applies to even doing Torah and mitzvahs. Right? I'm not just talking about not doing averos and doing mitzvahs. You can even be doing mitzvahs, but still from the perspective of nefesh habahamis. You could still be doing it from this space of this is heavy and I have to do this. I was literally just speaking to someone about this today, where she kept on using the word I have to and I have to. And yes, of course, we do have to do mitzvahs. I'm not saying that we don't have to. It's important. It's written in the Torah. But if I have that focus of this is a rule that I must keep, and that it's something that's heavy for me, then I'm missing the whole point. The whole point of Torah and mitzvahs is tzavta. Mitzvah comes from the word tzavta, to connect with Eibishter. That my neshama is supposed to connect with him and experience the joy of that. And if I'm missing that, then I'm just basically going through the practices of a religion, which is just basically habit building, as opposed to what it's supposed to really be, which is a development of relationship with Eibishter, a returning. So in order to live the life of a chassid, the Alter Rebbe is saying, it doesn't mean that you have to be a tzaddik. It doesn't have to mean that you have to never sin. But what the Alter Rebbe is bringing here is, let's see if we can make this focus on shuv, always returning, always breaking out of bondage, always breaking out of prison and experiencing the joy that comes along with that. So now the Alter Rebbe gets to the point where he's trying to bring this a beautiful idea. How do I do that tshuva? How do I get to that space of constant awareness of the joy that is so available to me because it's inside of me, it's a part of my existence? By doing mitzvahs, by pursuing mitzvahs, by in a constant state of looking for the next mitzvah. I do one mitzvah, great, I move on to the next mitzvah. What is that mitzvah supposed to be? It's supposed to be literally that experience of breaking out of bondage. I'm connecting with Eibishter with this. Just an interesting example that comes to mind, and it's good to bring this example so that it could feel very relatable. So I'm just thinking of someone in our community who is in a constant state of raising money for other people. So that's what he does. He goes around and he's asking people for money to help other people. He knows he's in the know of the community. He knows who needs, he knows who doesn't, he knows who can help right now. And this is what his life is. His life is in a constant state of doing a mitzvah. Now, the best way of achieving what the Alter Rebbe is talking about over here is not like you have to shake lulav and esrog all day. You could make the regular things that you do a mitzvah. Right? There's always someone to be kind to. There's always a nice word that can be said. There's always an opportunity to show love and care. There's always an opportunity to say a parak of Tehillim. There's so many opportunities throughout our day to experience that level of tzavta, of connection, of commitment to Eibishter, of reconnecting to our neshama's perspective instead of our guf's perspective. And if we make my life that is devoted to Yiddishkeit exciting, celebratory, joyful, then I'm truly living my life from my neshama's space. Now, how to do that would be to really ask myself, like, what is stopping me from feeling the excitement, the joy? Is it that I'm doing the mitzvah and I'm not really thinking about it? Is it that, and it could just be like something really practical, like I'm too tired, or I haven't invested any thought into it, or in general, I haven't been feeling feelings for a long time, and maybe there's something stopping me from even feeling my feelings. But describing what we're describing right here, right? This concept of like living from the perspective of my neshama and constantly in a state of mitzvahs and constantly breaking through those bonds throws us back to Perek Beis, where we're talking about the nefesh elokis and being a Beinoni. What is a Beinoni? The Alter Rebbe was talking about it right here, but it's taken him this long to kind of like unfold this concept of what this could practically look like for the people that I'm writing the Sefer for. You are a real person in this real world, living with a human body. And the Alter Rebbe made a lot of space for that. And he said, I understand, and I know why you have doubts, and I know why you have anxiety, and I know why you have fear. And you feel the burden of living in this world and not seeing Eibishter clearly. And I also want you to know that there's a very real part of you present. You just need to get aware to it. And the way to get aware to it is to be constantly in a state of teshuvah. Now, teshuvah doesn't mean repenting necessarily right here. It means returning back to me, the real me, my neshama, my godly perspective. And a way to do that is in the book. Hashem gave us the mitzvahs. But if I'm in a constant state of coming back to my neshama's perspective by constantly pursuing the next mitzvah, what I'm doing is I'm literally living the life of a Beinoni. That's how to achieve Beinoni lifestyle. Like we said before, it's not that the Beinoni doesn't have challenges. It's not like the Beinoni is not drawn to do something wrong. Here the Alter Rebbe is saying, just don't give yourself the time of day to be human. Just go forward. Constantly be in a state of teshuvah. And the Alter Rebbe gives a few different examples to kind of like help us understand what he's trying to say. And he says, imagine a prince who somehow was captured and he's taken captive, and now he has to be a slave of like the lowest form. And he gives the example of like the slaves who used to grind flour at a mill. So imagine like the idea of, I don't know when this was, like the 700s or something, but like the time of the Vikings, you know, where a man was literally like chained to a boat for 10 years and just had to row for 10 years. He's just rowing. This was his life. He was fed on his block of a chair, you know, his bench. He was fed, given food, and you stay there forever. That's like the lowest type of slavery. That's the kind of slavery the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. A man who is chained to a mill and has to walk in circles for 10 years. Ultimate form of slavery, ultimate form of like dehumanizing a person, right? So take a prince and bring him to that low. And the Alter Rebbe says, now suddenly something happens and the prince is able to return back to his father's palace. And he comes back, he's returning. He didn't have a chance to do anything to help with appearance. All of him is just returning. He smells bad, he looks bad, he still has all the trauma going on. But the fact that he has now come into the palace, he's prince. He's there. He is fully the prince still. He's still in the garbage. He's still gross. He still feels yucky. He still has all that trauma still a part of him. It doesn't matter. His identity has always been, will always be prince. And now he experienced that tshuva. He's just coming back home. And all that doesn't really matter. Yes, of course, he is still, you know, he still had all that trauma. He still had that experience. It's going to have an effect on him. But he still is who he is. And now he could just go back into his father's arms because that's who he is. It never changed. His identity has stayed the same throughout. So the Alter Rebbe gives this example to let us know we are free, always free. We always have been free. Even if we're experiencing the bondage because we're literally chained to the mill, doesn't mean that we have changed. We're still the prince. A prince is free. He is the king's son. He can do anything. He's experiencing that joy, that freedom, can do anything. So yes, he's bonded. Yes, he's having this terrible experience, but still he is the prince. And he could bring himself back to that state, bring himself back to the palace, even if he's not exactly fully free, right? We still are human. We're still in this world. But the more we bring ourselves back with every single time that we decide to do teshuvah, what we're doing is we're choosing freedom. We're choosing joy. We're choosing passion in life. Another example that the Alter Rebbe brings is Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is basically the theme of our lives. What happened during Yetzias Mitzrayim? The Yidden were sent to the lowest of the low, and they fell to the lowest of the low. Yetzias Mitzrayim, the redemption from Egypt, when we came out of Mitzrayim. So the Exodus, right? So what is the Exodus? What is the story of Exodus that is a recurring theme throughout all of our Jewish history? It is the fact that we were sent into slavery, we experienced bondage, and we couldn't take ourselves out of it. It says in the Gemara that Hashem literally had to drag us out of Mitzrayim. And even then, we questioned, we doubted, we complained. We finally got to Har Sinai, and the point was that Hashem wanted to give us the Torah, and we would experience Geula right then. We would experience that connection, Mashiach's times right then, but we just weren't able to receive it. We weren't there. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, the whole concept of coming out of Mitzrayim became the theme of Galus. It became the theme of our experience, our lived experience. And so we, as Yidden, live with that constantly. What we are living with is, like the Alter Rebbe explains, is a freedom of bondage. Every time we experience that concept of teshuvah, what we're doing is we're reliving Yetzias Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim comes from the word from Meitzar. Meitzar means a bond. So when we come out of those Meitzarim, of those bondages, of those shackles, what we're doing is we're experiencing a personal redemption. And every time we redeem ourselves, when we break ourselves out of that limitation or that closed box that we put ourselves into, what we're bringing is a redemption for not just ourselves, but for the entire world. So what that means is every time I have a personal struggle, I have a personal limitation, I have a way of looking at myself that's hindering me from experiencing the joy of living with Eibishter and living with my neshama's perspective of this world. When I break out of that and I really put that behind me, what I'm doing is I'm taking it's called like the Dalet Amis, the small section of my world here in this world, and I'm redeeming it. And I'm allowing it to have the perspective of my neshama's perspective, Hashem's perspective. And what I'm doing is breaking my portion of this world, breaking that prison and opening it up to the freedom of truth, of Hashem. So the theme of Yetzias Mitzrayim is, yes, like we have been saying throughout, it's a harsh theme. It's a theme of slavery. It's scary. It's painful. And at the same time, even though the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, Hashem throughout cared for them, took care of them, brought them out, and broke them out of it. And now we have that Nesinas Kayach, that ability to now be able to do the same for ourselves. So every time we choose to pursue another mitzvah in our regular everyday life, what we're doing is we're choosing a godly perspective, a neshama's perspective, over our nefesh habahamis, body, guf, prison perspective. And that means that each day we're becoming more and more and more free, as long as we're on that track to try to pursue that truth. And so here the Alter Rebbe is saying, if you want to experience passion in your Avodas Hashem, you have to also experience the emancipation, the breaking out of bondage. That joy will help you get rid of the Timtum Alev. And the way to do that is to experience that closed, open. I'm a guf, I'm an neshama. I'm a guf, I'm a neshama. That's what our lived experience is supposed to be. And as soon as we can embrace that and celebrate that, now we're heading in the direction that we're supposed to be doing. That's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be experiencing that and choosing the light, choosing the life, seeing Hashem as our source of bracha. Something that I think is just an important piece to make it really practical. When we stop and we think, like, okay, what are my limitations? It could be a little bit hard to start thinking, like, what are my actual limitations in my Avodas Hashem? Because the whole point of a limitation is that you don't see it. Because if you saw it, then you're already on your way towards breaking free from it, right? That's part of the covering up, the klipa. If it's covered, how are you supposed to be able to see it? It's literally the covering is shading your eyes. So one of the things that the Rebbe spoke a lot about is having a chaver, having a friend, having someone who is a good influence, a mentor. And when you experience talking to that person, they could point out to you where your limitations are. And you could experience the humility of hearing that from somebody else. Another Chassidish concept is a farbrengen, where you sit together and you discuss your Avodas Hashem. And when hearing other people's struggles or what they're trying to overcome or what they're working on, it also opens up for you the idea of, I also struggle with that, and I can also see myself in her story, and maybe I can also pursue growth in that way. So what I'm trying to bring forth in order to make it a little bit more practical is the Alter Rebbe deeply believed in this being a communal experience. It's an experience that all of us are supposed to be feeling together in instead of you feeling alone in it. It's not, I have my own struggles and I just have to figure this out and I have to experience the pain of galus and breaking out of it all on my own. No, there's so much infrastructure that the Alter Rebbe is bringing in even just like the camaraderie of being a chassid, where you have a friend you can speak to, you have a fellow mentor, you have a farbrengen at your disposal. There is a community where you can feel connected to, and this actually segues beautiful into Perek Lamed Beis, and we'll get to that next time. But the idea is that don't feel alone in your Avodas Hashem here, because that aloneness already is a limitation. We as Am Yisrael are all experiencing the same thing, and part of Yetzias Mitzrayim was that a nation came out of Mitzrayim, which means that part of this breaking out of bondage has to be that we do it collectively. We do it together. We do it in a way of supporting one another. A lot of times before Hasidism was around, Avodas Hashem was very much like the lone wolf experience, where you just had to go out into the field or think to yourself or daven on your own. And yes, there's place for that. And at the same time, there's also an incredible feeling of, I'm here with you. There's no shame in what you're experiencing, because we're all experiencing the same thing. We all have our struggles in our own way. We all have our limitations. And I can learn from you just like you can learn from me. And together, it's so much easier to break through these bonds. So I'm just bringing kind of like a practical, hopeful perspective where you don't have to feel alone in trying to figure it out or even the breakage of that bonds. Instead, you could do it with a friend. You could sit down together. You could come to a farbrengen and come to a class and hear different examples and know that everyone in the class is experiencing the same thing. We're all struggling with the exact same things. We all struggle with the sor meira, like the things we want to distance ourselves from, the asay tev, the things we want to increase in and become better at. And in both ways, we could experience limitation in that, right? So like the sor meira, the examples of like, I'm struggling with lashon hara, I'm struggling with being patient with my kids, I'm struggling with my relationship with my sister, I'm struggling with, we're all struggling in something that we need to distance ourselves from. And we also are all struggling with trying to be better at certain mitzvahs that we should be better at, or showing up better. So all the voices that tell me, don't do that, it's going to be embarrassing, or you're not going to be as good as the next person, or, she obviously knows this concept better, so let her be the teacher, or, I don't know, all the things that stop us from doing good things. Maybe that person is going to be embarrassed if I ask her how she's feeling, or she's not going to like it that I check in with her. We have so many voices, and we're all in it together. So the more that we could support one another and appreciate that we're all in it together, the more that we could feel that global emancipation instead of just like our own little wins that we have for ourselves. And hopefully with all of us uniting and understanding one another and supporting one another in our own personal avodah, the more we could transform all the different missing places that are in the world that haven't been redeemed yet, and hopefully bring the ultimate geula by redeeming all those parts of the world that have not yet been redeemed. So this should be a merit for the ultimate geula, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you.
So welcome. Bye. Very interesting. There's people commenting on here.
Oh, yes?
Yeah.
It's going to really be resonating with people. There's talk these days about a loneliness epidemic in the whole world, not just because of it in the Jewish community. I was actually just talking to someone today who's a rabbi in a community somewhere in the United States, and he's a widow, he doesn't get invited. So what all that contains, but when we just even talk to each other about our loneliness, talk about issues that were, even though we didn't maybe come up with a brilliant solution, the fact that we looked into each other's eyes and we talked about it, we eased each other's pain, and that's a mitzvah.
Yes.
We're bringing each other back to wholeness.
Yes.
So just by talking about it, we're repairing it. And also, I think, if I heard you correctly, you were saying when we strengthen and neshamify our own corner of the world.
I love that, neshamify.
I just made that up.
I love it. I'm going to use that one.
Please do. Doesn't it say somewhere in the Talmud that he or she who saves one life is as if she has saved the entire world?
Of course.
So if I save my life by redeeming my neshamify, that impacts the entire world.
Yes. That's a gorgeous interpretation. I love that. I saved my own life. Beautiful.
If I save my own life just
like
by a
saving the whole
moment of
world.
remembering that I'm connected to the Eibishter, maybe I forget it in the next moment, the whole world gets the benefit of that holiness.
Yes. Gorgeous.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
So here we are laboring away in our shame and our loneliness and our fear and alienation.
Right.
And we have this gorgeous power.
Exactly. There's so much there. I'm just totally missing it. Like totally not seeing it. Chipping away and like,
But we can remind each other too.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful.
It's always good to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was
I appreciate
wonderful.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. You may have saved some lives.
Yeah, this person looks like she's really, she said thank you. She's saying such really sad things. Okay? You're welcome. Oh, my mom. I thought you were talking about Meira.